Hey folks, we'll be getting started in just a moment. We're going to let everybody go ahead and get into our room. All right. Good evening, folks. My name is Amy Thompson. I'm the College and Career Counselor at Hillsborough High School. Welcome to our early college planning night for 9th and 10th grade students. I see we've been doing a quick little poll here, and I see that we are about 2/3 9th grade parents and 1/3 10th grade parents. So for those that are 9th grade parents, welcome to the high school and probably one of your first high school programs. This is the first of many in a long kind of series of programming that takes your student all the way through their high school graduation about 3.5 years from now. So for this evening's program, I'm just going to give you an idea of what we're doing tonight. Hold on. And all right, for this evening's program, we are going to be covering a whole bunch of information. So we'll be talking about really the timeline of what's going to happen throughout your child's 4 years in high school, what to expect, try to give you an idea about what to expect when, because you don't know what you don't know. And then we'll be talking about the most important parts of the students' high school experience in terms of what they can prepare for applying to college in a couple of years. We'll talk about how to begin that search when it's time, and also try to give you a bit of a lay of the land in regards to what to expect about money and finances and how to prepare ahead of time. I am no financial expert by any means, but I do think it's really important that you start to understand what's coming and what things look like in 2026. It's been a long time since most of us were applying to college, and lots of things are different. So this evening, throughout the presentation, I do have a co-presenter who I'll introduce in just a second. We do have a Q&A function on, so we don't have the chat on, so you can't do the commenting, but you can ask questions, get answers. If it needs to be an anonymous question, you can just check that box when you send it. And either one of us will be answering questions when we're not presenting. And sometimes we may just ask you to hold on a little bit. And we may just mark it as something that we'll answer live because it's something we know we're going to get to a little bit later, and we'd rather you just hang on. So this evening, I have with me the fabulous Laura Housel, who is one of our school counselors. So I just want to kind of explain how things work since you're new to the high school, many of you. So at Hillsborough High School in the counseling department, we have 10 school counselors. Each of our school counselors is assigned a caseload of students, and it is assigned by grade level and by last name. So Mrs. Housel works with students at the top of the alphabet in all of the grade levels. So she's usually kind of in the A-B range. And that school counselor is going to work with your student all the way through their years here at Hillsborough High School. So all the way up until they graduate. They are going to work with them on course selection and scheduling, other academic concerns, their college or other future plans, depending on what those are. They are the person who just 3 years from now will be done, 2 or 3 years, depending how old your kid is, done writing your kid's college letter of recommendation. That comes from their assigned school counselor. So it's really important that students cultivate that relationship throughout their high school experience. That is the person that can most help them in all regards and can answer all of their questions. I have a different role. I'm the college and career counselor. And so my role really for 9th and 10th graders is more programmatic and communication oriented. So we have students, if you have got individual questions, parents, the person to go through is always your school counselor for the first, I'd say, 2.5 years. They're going to have the vast majority of the answers to the questions that you have. And in addition, if they don't know, they'll reach out to me and say like, hey, can you, sit in with us? Can you give me a little bit more information? I want to make sure I'm helping the student right, because we want you to have that relationship. I start meeting with students and families individually in the spring semester of their junior year. And in addition to this being, just a good idea for students to make that relationship with their counselor, I'll admit it's also super practical because we have so many students at the high school. So my individual efforts can really focus in on students in their senior year. And then when the seniors are kind of getting past their college applications, then I kind of pick up with the juniors while I still support the seniors the rest of the way. While sometimes students wish they had that individual attention from me earlier, it's not always possible. We have over 600 students in some of the grades, so it's a lot of humans and just me. But when they're later on in their high school experience, they're really glad they're able to have that individual attention there for their specific plans. So that's kind of how we work things at the high school. So tonight's program, the first part of our program is going to be presented by the fabulous Laura Housel. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her and let her run with it. And I'm going to turn off and I'll answer questions in the background.
Hi, everybody. So we're just going to run through each year and do a little timeline of what we do with the students. So you have an idea of what their high school will look like while they're there. Obviously, the first thing we want them to do is to settle in. And at this point, we're hoping that most of them are. And obviously, if there's something going on, we hope that they would come and let us know so we can help them settle in. Right before the holiday break, we did meet your school counselor. We sent out an email to our students asking them to schedule an appointment with us so we can sit with them. And we did like almost a 5 to 10 minute interview with them, asking them questions to get to know them a little bit, allowing them to ask us questions. And then we went over things that the big differences between middle school and high school. We talked about grades and transcripts. We talked about the attendance policy, how to make appointments with us. If for some reason, since there's a lot of freshman parents here, if for some reason your child didn't get to meet us, it's most likely because of the next item on our list: read emails. We need these students to read emails. That is how a lot of communication is done, especially now that we do not have homeroom anymore. That was an easy way to get communications to the students. And that was a little before technology really came into being. But we push, and we really want them to start checking their emails because, again, that's how we communicate everything with them. More than likely, like I said, they did not make that appointment if they didn't see us because they didn't check their email. So if you can help us enforce that, every year it's going to become important, especially by senior year, because they'll have graduation information to fill out. They'll be hearing from Ms. Thompson, their counselors, the principal. So really try to help us push that. They got to get on that email. We also hope this year that they develop stronger study skills, time management, learn what's necessary to get the results that they want. We're obviously there to help them with this. And I know I've already seen several students, even some students who weren't even freshmen, who are still struggling and trying to figure out how to plan everything out because they've gotten more involved and their time is not as available as it used to be. Another thing is that what we really want to stress to them is they want to do as well as possible in the courses that they are in now. We're coming up on scheduling, and right about now, our teachers should be talking to the students about the course for next year that they're going to take and about the level that they recommend them to take. So a lot of our students that are in CP want to move up to honors, and if they're in honors, they want to eventually move up to AP. But there are prerequisites in order to do that. I'm sorry, I have 4-month-old puppies, and they were just set free. So they want to do as well in those courses because the teacher is going to make the recommendation if they have the correct grade, the grade that's necessary for them to take that next course. Okay. In addition, they want to make sure they're doing homework and such because a lot of teachers will look at their work ethic and how committed they are to that class and if they'll be successful in that next level. Another thing, we had an activity fair, I think in October, November of 2025, and students got a chance to walk around and see what there was to offer. If for some reason didn't have a chance to go there, or they were busy and now they want to get involved, on the website we have a list of all the different clubs and organizations broken down by sports, academic clubs, social clubs. I often get asked, Miss Housel, do you know if they have this club? Every year, I'm here 24 years now, and every year the number of clubs just keeps increasing. So the best thing they could do is go on there. There's a contact person, reach out to that advisor, say, I'm interested in joining. Is there still time? So there's plenty of time to do that. But I will say, I was very impressed with the freshmen I got to meet with, because I think maybe one was involved outside, so didn't get involved inside yet. Everybody else was doing something. So I was so proud of them that they jumped right in and started to explore the high school and get involved. Next thing, that right about this time, if they haven't, some students are eager and came in with theirs already. A lot of our students start doing it now, because we're going to start talking to them about scheduling and heading into scheduling. They chart out their academic plan for high school. So what I mean by that is they will chart out what class in math they're going to take next and what level they might want. The best thing they could do to get organized in doing that is to review our program of studies, which we will be talking to them about soon, because that shows you different pathways that you can take in the subject areas. And it also tells you what prerequisites, whether it be grade or a different class, that you need to have taken, or a grade you need to have gotten in order to take that class. So students, like I said, some do it on their own. A lot of times they'll come in and ask us to help them do that. And we are more than happy to help them do that if that's, a need that they have. They might want to start thinking about college ideas. I'm sure we're going to get into this a little bit later, but just start brainstorming. They're going to hear kids talking about a lot of names of schools and stuff. They could start checking them out. But in all honesty, the main thing we want them to do this year is settle in, meet us, get to know the school, and focus on their grades, because that is really important. And if we do have students on here, colleges do look at your freshman year. So that is very important. You might want to start thinking about college finances, having the discussion about, how much is affordable, things like that, what can make things cheaper. And then probably in a couple months, different summer program opportunities are going to be coming out. And I know on Mrs. Thompson's website, if you haven't looked at her website yet, it's fabulous. She has so much information on there. But somewhere near the bottom, I believe, there's summer enrichment opportunities and volunteer opportunities. So as she gets information about these things, she posts them on her website, and the students can find that information there. Some information we got from students, I guess we did a poll, and what do you wish you knew or took seriously in 9th or 10th grade? Taking the time to form relationships with teachers, especially sophomore year. And that's because you will hear us talk about later. They will need to talk to their teachers and get letters of recommendation. Anything else you wish someone told you early in high school? Focus on your grades, but still be well-rounded. Be involved and do what you like. And that's what we advise students to do also. Sophomore year. Students would want to start thinking about revising their academic plan for the following year and senior year, if anything has changed. Extracurriculars, what we mean by refine them. Colleges love to see students involved in a bunch of different things their freshman year, but then as the years go on, they really would like to see students start to hone in on what they're passionate about, what they want to do as a career. So like I said, we have a bunch of different clubs and organizations. Hopefully by sophomore year, they're starting to think about these things and they start exploring those different areas and getting involved. They do look at things that are done outside of school also, and that counts. So if there's anything happening outside of school or anything they want to get involved with, like volunteer opportunities, some students find some shadowing opportunities. That's things they can do also. They definitely want to start forming relationships, not only with us, but with their teachers. Again, we're going to say later, We do prefer that they ask junior year teachers for letters of recommendation. However, there is a possibility they could have had a teacher freshman or sophomore year and then again junior year. And that would be okay because the teacher would see growth in them and could write about that. But it's good for them to form relationships in case they need to go back to sophomore year and ask a teacher for a letter. In October, we recommend sophomores take the PSAT. It's not required, but it's highly recommended. It's a practice SAT. It gives them the idea of getting their feet wet, what that test might be like. And then they can take it again junior year. And right before they get ready is one more practice before the SAT. Definitely continue to discuss the idea of college and identify important characteristics. What that means is what's important to your student? What do they want on a college campus? What size? One of my big things was I didn't want to have to, if I was late, I wanted to be able to roll out of bed, throw sweats on, and go. I didn't want to have to wait for a bus. So not only the size of the campus, but size of the classes. Do they want to be close, far? So different things like that you can start discussing. We will be meeting them with their sophomore year in groups to do interest surveys. Um, we put them on the computer. We talk to them a little bit about setting goals and how doing this assessment can help them plan out the next couple years with the elective courses. So the one we did this year was about 30 minutes, and it's a personality assessment and asks them a bunch of questions, and then a list of careers come up. It was interesting. Some of them matched what they wanted to do. Some of them were way off. There was another one we recommend they do. And then the hardest part is getting them to explore those options. We explained to them we don't want them to just put this away now. It's in a program that we use called SCORE. And we don't do too much with them freshman year with SCORE, but starting with the sophomore groups, that's when they get on, they do the assessment for the careers. Junior year, we'll have them on doing a college search, updating some information. Senior year, they're going to use that to keep track of all the applications they send out and things like that. So they can go back into SCORE at any time once they do these assessments and look up their results and start to research. We also sent them the slides with the different links and different websites they could go to for more information. In SCORE, I said we'll be using that senior year to send things out. There is a way that you could start adding schools to the following column. There's a column for schools that you're just browsing, that you're checking out. You're not committed to anything. If we think of a school for your student, we can go in and add it. We cannot delete anything, but we can add schools for them. They can delete if they choose. And then once they start deciding where they're going to apply, they'll move that over to applying. And then senior year, once they send out their application, they'll move it over to applied. And that is a signal for us to send out their transcript and other information. So they could start adding schools there, checking out their websites, really starting to look into different details. We definitely highly recommend keeping track and keeping organized, writing down what you're looking for, writing down what characteristics each school has in line with what you want. So that way it makes organizing this process a little bit easier. November through March, again, explore different summer opportunities as they come up. We talked about Miss Thompson's website. In March, it's usually every March, sometimes it may be April, but usually it's been March. We have a college fair at the high school, and it's always well attended, and we always have a number of colleges there. So you can come as a sophomore, even if as a freshman, if you choose, collect some information, start looking at things. And then obviously as a junior, you want to come see if there's different schools there. Your interests may have changed, collect more information. If you choose to, you can start visiting colleges sophomore year. That is something I'm sure Ms. Thompson will talk about at some point, but we definitely highly recommend you visit the colleges. A lot of students start doing that junior year, but you can do it at any point. You really want to see if that is a fit for you. And that's again where we talk about the size, just the comfort, seeing the place. You'll know when you get there if you like it or not. And we really feel that, starting those visits are important. In April of sophomore year, Mrs. Thompson puts together a college panel with representatives from different colleges, and it is virtual, and they answer different questions that students, are usually curious about. So that's something great to attend in April of your sophomore year. Okay. I think we're good there. Okay. Junior, senior year. So since this is early college planning, we're going to breeze through this. But again, yes, junior year is very important, but so is freshman and sophomore year because the colleges will see final grades for all 3 years, grades for all 3 years, which we will be talking about, going to your GPA, and that is very important. So junior year, they think is the most important year because that's when you start to research. But again, they're all important. We start preparing them about college. We work with our seniors, and then December, January, we start meeting with the juniors in groups. And we talk to them about getting ready for this process, taking the SATs, how to register, doing more research on careers, majors, and then what colleges have those careers and majors. Again, visiting more, start narrowing down that following list to, a more acceptable list of however many schools you want to apply to, making sure that the schools that you're putting on that list are a good fit for you. In the spring, you'll ask your teachers for letters of recommendation. We ask all students to ask 2 teachers that they feel they have a good relationship with, to write them a letter of recommendation. And then later in their junior year, sometimes April, May, somewhere in there, they'll start writing their college essay. A lot of students do choose to use that essay, and it makes it easier for them senior year. We do tell them to review it, tweak it a little bit over the summer if necessary, but a lot of students do use the essay that they write in class. Senior year is the big year where they get really stressed out. We try to tell them to do a lot of stuff over the summer. We don't want them sending anything out over the summer, but there are a lot of pieces that they can do over the summer to help them ease into the school year, and trying to keep, again, everything managed. And that's why throughout we're hoping that they're learning those time management skills. And if they're having a hard time with it, they come to see us. But senior year, as soon as we come back, right after we do our scheduling changes and such, we'll be meeting with them in groups again, talking to them about the submission process, and how to submit their applications and what to do. We then talk to them about financial aid and the different financial aid forms that might be used and how to go about applying for that. Ms. Thompson also has a fabulous financial aid night program, which is virtual, I believe in October, November, that you can attend, and very good information. Everything you need to know probably is in that webinar. Applying for scholarships. You can also start doing that in junior year, doing some searches for scholarships for juniors in high school. There may not be a lot out there, but there might be some. Whatever you do, do not pay money for a scholarship search. That's a scam. You're looking for money. You don't need to pay anybody. So, I'm sure Miss Thompson, I know Miss Thompson has websites on her website that you could go to look at when you're ready for that. We always tell our students, before you make your final decision, go back and visit again. Visit where you got accepted to, however many schools you're trying to decide between. I had the conversation today with a student. She got into a school she never thought she would get into. And then in the afternoon, she found out she got into another one. 2 of her first choices. One is more expensive. She's trying to figure out what to do. So that's the time they feel like the applying time is stressful, but then when they have to make that decision, and they'll start getting results back. That's a tough time for them too. So taking those final visits one more time to make that final decision, is always good. And then they have to make that decision by May 1st of their senior year. That is the national response deadline. So May 1st, they'll be doing that. Okay. I'm sorry. Let's talk about academic preparation. So as you're starting the process and you're going through the search and everything, you'll hear the colleges will say the required GPA on a 4.0 scale. We don't use a 4.0 scale. We use a 100-point scale. So the students will often ask us, and we tell them on their application, they have to put it in a 100-point scale. The college will convert it to the scale that they use. I always tell my students if they want a 4.0 scale to look at, I tell them to go to College Board. Just type in College Board 4.0 scale, it'll come up and you can compare using that, but always make sure it's on a 100-point scale when they apply. Each year on the transcript, which we will show you in a little bit, you will see at the end of the year your yearly GPA on the bottom. No, your yearly GPA up in the grade. And then on the bottom, you'll see your cumulative weighted. Here we go. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. So you'll see the classes, the transcript has on it the classes, the level they're taking, only the final grade, and then the credits. On the bottom, it shows their absence, their tardies, which I don't think students realize that the colleges see that also, how many credits they earned, and then the weighted and unweighted GPA for each year. Then on the bottom, it shows you the total credits earned, and then their weighted GPA and unweighted GPA. Okay. Students also need to understand that, and Ms. Thompson might mention this at some point, maybe not in this program, but later, that schools also recalculate GPAs. So they use that as a base, and then they pull out the students' academic courses and then recalculate. Colleges get a transcript, which is what we just showed you, and not report cards. So each of the first 3 years, like I said, they only see the final averages. Senior year shows the courses that they're taking. When the transcript is sent, that's all that they see. I think I had 1 or 2 colleges maybe ask for first marking period grades this year. That doesn't happen too often, but it can happen. A lot of schools do want to see mid-year grades. Now, so at that point, what we do is we wait for grades to come in, and then we average out the first and second marking period, and we send them an average. So if there was an oopsie in a class somewhere, hopefully it was fixed in one of the marking periods and it looks better as an average. And that's what we send out to them. Something I missed up top. I'm so sorry. When we were talking about GPA, I just noticed that. The course weightings. If a student is in an AP course or a concurrent course, which is usually junior, senior year, the weight is a 1.15. Honors is 1.10. CP is 1.05. And then the other courses with no levels, electives and such are 1.0. So what that means is the student's grade would be multiplied by those points, and then that would be the weight towards their GPA. Okay. Okay. Graduation requirements. Every student needs to meet the state requirements for New Jersey. 4 years of English, 4 years of health and PE. 3 years are required for graduation. However, we highly recommend 4 years, and we will push them to take that 4th year. Only 3 years of social studies and history, 3 years of science, 1 year of a world language to graduate. However, if the student is planning to apply to a 4-year school, we recommend 2 years. And then if they're planning to apply to Ivy Leagues or those high-powered schools, they should really think about taking 3 to 4 years of the language. They need 5 credits, which is 1 full year of the career vocational electives, 5 credits 1 year of the visual performing arts electives, and then a half a year of financial literacy. Okay. So they only need 120 credits to graduate, but if they take the full load of 35 credits a year, they finish with 140. So they need to meet minimum 120, pass the state assessment for the NJGPA that they take junior year, and file the FAFSA or opt out of filing as required by the state of New Jersey. And Ms. Thompson will talk more about that later. Typical schedules for grades 9, 10, and 11. They all look a little similar. English, gym, math, science, history for the first 3 years are required. And then in one of those years, you have to do at least 1 or 2 years of the world language, and then the seventh period is electives. We highly recommend that students try to fulfill their vocational electives and art electives early on, because as a junior, a whole new world of AP academics, electives that are college prep, that are academic in nature, where they can start exploring different careers and such. A lot of those open up junior, senior year. So they'll have more room to explore those if they've already had their requirements met. And also, we do talk to this about this, and we will talk to them about it soon. They want to plan ahead, because many courses, not only electives, but many academic courses have prerequisites. And I think I mentioned this earlier, have prerequisites, not only a certain grade that they need to get into the course, but also, um, I just drew a blank, not only the grade, but it might involve a teacher recommendation. So they want to plan out, make that 4-year plan. And also in our program of studies, there is a form of an example that they can use to help a chart to help plan them out those 4 years if needed. Okay. Real quick, Miss Thompson, can we go back? Because I like that quote. What would you do differently if you had a redo? Study a little bit every day, connecting everything you learned. I learned that last year. I told one of my I would love to know if that was one of my students, because I often tell my students that and they look at me like I have 12 heads. I tell them to go home every night and read the notes that they were either given or that they took Monday through Friday. Just go over and read it. And then I had a student say, and on Fridays I can write a review to see if I remember. I said, well, that would be awesome. But that does help process things. So I was very excited when I saw that quote up there. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Okay, senior year. Like I said, choices, and it starts a little bit junior year. If the student is planning out successfully and doing very well and passing everything, all they really need to take senior year is English, gym. Again, we are going to push that 4th year in math. Hopefully, they wouldn't have any remaining graduation requirements, but if they do, that would fit into that period. And then they have 5, 6, 7, 3 periods of electives. If they finish their requirements, they would have 4. And like I said, that's where there's AP classes. There's a lot of academic courses that they could take, academic electives to get a feel of different things. That's where we tell them to correlate with your post-high school plans. Think about your major. Balance is also important. And I think I wanted to say this later, but I'm glad that came up. Academically, 4 years of science, history, social studies, that's great. Academic electives like law and sociology, other classes, painting, culinary. I try to tell my students those are the classes you want to do for requirements early on. You don't want to pile them all in senior year. The colleges want to see you challenging yourself throughout high school in the highest level possible to the best of your ability, in the level that you can handle. But then they don't want to see you giving up senior year, not giving up, but having this fluff course load senior year. They still want to see you're committed to your academics and you're still exploring and you're still trying. So I had a junior come in and ask me, what can I do this summer to put on my application? And I said, kiddo, I said, I said, do something that interests you, especially if you're passionate about it or for your major. I said, you don't want to start joining clubs and organizations and loading everything up on the far end. Colleges will know you're doing it to look good. So that's why they want to start early with the planning and thinking and be consistent in it, because that's what they want to see. And something about the language requirement, by the way, 2 years of the same language. And if they do more, they want to see the same language. If they just see 2 years of one level of the first level, they're trying to take the easy way out. And Miss Thompson and I worked in admissions, and we can tell you that that is the way it would be seen. So they want to do consistent levels in a language. Thank you. Okay. I just mentioned this, something to consider. Colleges want the students to take the highest level of rigor where the student can meet with success. I cannot tell you how many colleges I met with last year where I heard them say those same things. and where they said if a student cannot get an A, high B in an AP class, they should be in the honors class getting the A. And I have quite a few students who are in those AP classes because they want it on their transcripts and they're mid-low Bs. And I try to tell them, yes, it looks good, but only if you're doing good. So have your student keep that in mind. And you know that also. I tell my students, if you're recommended for AP US, but you're not passionate about it and you don't like history, don't take that AP class. You're not going to enjoy it. It's a lot of work and it's going to be very hard. Take your AP class somewhere else. Okay, so that way it'll be easier to achieve that A, that high B. CP versus honors versus AP, which is advanced placement. Again, this is the time around now. Teachers are starting to talk to their students about what they want to do for next year. And they enter these levels by teacher recommendation. So they can't just decide to do that. When the students are filling out their scheduling information with you in the computer, we're asking them to put in electives. Many of them will put in geometry honors. Now, that's not a choice. That has to come from the teacher, that recommendation. The only choice the student really has is to do well so they can get into that level, but the choices are with the elective. College credit opportunities in high school. The AP courses are a chance for students to take that class. They take the AP test in May. If they score 3 or higher, a lot of colleges will take those credits and apply it to the student. If it's in the student's major, they may apply it as an elective or they may not take it at all. And that's where we tell students they need to do that research to find out if those, if their colleges are going to accept them or not. The same thing with the concurrent and dual enrollment. Concurrent right now, we have concurrent English for seniors with RVCC at the high school. We have a couple English teachers that teach that. But then we also have dual enrollment classes with RVCC, TCNJ, and Seton Hall. And that's totally done on your own. And dual enrollment is done on your own. It's not done on your own. You're enrolled in it. You're taking the class at the high school, but then you're going to get the credits from that college. And then early credits, that's where I was getting confused. Early credits at RVCC is something you would do on your own, either over the summer. I had a student get out early senior year and then do that. So that would be up to you. Doubling up in math is only allowed with geometry and algebra 2. And again, by teacher recommendation only. And 2 sciences in the same year can only have a max of 2 labs. So it's really only honor sciences. The 2 AP sciences don't work out.
I'm going to pop in for a second, Ms. Hauser,
That's why
before
I
we go on
paused.
and look at this stuff,
Yes.
because I got a question about the elephant in the room, which is some people have heard about a possible change to a different bell schedule.
Okay.
So I'm going to address the elephant in the room and say, as of now, I don't know what that's going to look like for next year. Right now, we're operating under the assumption that things are going to stay the same. It is a possibility that that might be different next year. It is a possibility that if it's not different in 2026, 2027, it would be very possible that it would be in place for 2027, 28. If that change is decided that at the point that it becomes clear that that's happening, right? There's going to be a series of communications that are going to come out to staff first, obviously, because great if everybody at the high school knows what's going on. And then we notify students, and parents would be notified as well. They talk about what that looks like, what that different kind of schedule looks like, because while some of us have heard about a block, which is more of like an A day, B day, like Hunterdon Central does, if you know anybody that goes there. But there are also lots of other options that are out there around kind of in between length courses that are more like an hour, and students have maybe 6 of 8 in a given day, and it kind of rotates through days of the week. So there's a lot of different options out there. Once it's kind of decided if anything's happening, what it is, that'll be communicated out. One of the things that we'll really explain to students and families at that point as well is we're really going to communicate kind of like the things that affect you, the things that you might need to be planning for differently given this extra period, right? So if there was another period in the day, like what would you do with it? And we would talk about what those things are. We'd also talk about any limitations that might exist in that new world of a new schedule around what students could or couldn't do that's different from what they do now. So if it happens, we'll tell you. I would say that if it's going to happen for next year, you'll probably know about it within the next month. We're not going to do a lot of course selection until we know what's happening, right? Because we can't have you pick classes and then change gears. It's just not possible. There's way too many of these kids in this building, right? So we'll know. Once we know, we're going to communicate that out. But I mean, I'll acknowledge that the rumors are out there, and I'll acknowledge there's, definitely truth to discussing those, that those discussions are happening. So something's probably going to happen at some point. Don't know when it's going to be. So that's kind of just a good feed in as you're looking at some of these things like outside of school, because a lot of those things that become probably less necessary is if there was room perhaps in the schedule for another course, students might feel less pressed to take some of these things that are on the screen right now, these option 2 courses, these things outside of school, if they had more room in the day. Because right now, and now I was getting starting to get a lot of those questions on the Q&A about, taking online courses, taking summer courses. I think the big reason that students tend to do that is because they feel like there's not room in their day. And that especially impacts, full disclosure, especially impacts students who are in the fine and performing arts courses, because they want to continue in that band and choir and that orchestra, and they feel like there's not room. And so that is a reason that students currently now turn to outside courses. And so you might find if there's a change that you don't feel so much like you need to do these things. I encourage students to hold on. I'm making real concrete plans for this summer for classes, especially because if there's a change, you might decide, I don't got to do that anymore. You know what I mean? And I could meet my needs right in the school building with the property taxes that we're already paying. We don't need to pay for online stuff. So hang tight about some of that kind of stuff for a few minutes. So I'll just let Ms. Housel see if there's anything else she wanted to say here. We're getting close to the end of her section, and then we'll transition.
No, we're good. Not sure how much I had left, but summer classes and option 2. These will be coming out in March or May, the letter about at HHS. It varies each summer. We have had Geometry and Algebra 2 honors. We will have them again this summer for sure. Invite only. Again, students have to meet the requirements for those classes, have had to have been recommended for those classes. They'll get that invite. Financial literacy is also an option. And because it is, I'll explain this more in a minute, because it's taken at the high school, it will be on the transcript and count towards the GPA. Public speaking and computer programming are usually offered at the high school. They show up on the transcript. Outside classes through the option 2 process, which means anything taken outside of the high school, whether it's at another school, college, or online, costs money. And they have to speak to us because there's a certain time for an application to be filled out. They have to be approved for it. And they really need to know that it does not count in their GPA. It will appear on their transcript, but it will not account in the GPA. The most popular one that's taken is financial lit, but then a lot of students do use the online courses to fulfill their graduation requirements. So like I said, right about now, teachers are recommending the academic courses. The students are then and the teachers are communicating about it. Students and parents will be reviewing the program of studies, and we'll probably be doing that early February, mid-February at some point, if not sooner. Then we ask you to make the elective choices, and we ask for 10. The more the student gives us, the better chance they have of getting into something they like. You will put that with your student into the Genesis portal. February, March, students will be meeting with us to individually adjust and finalize their requests. And we need to explain to them over and over that they are requests. Nothing is finalized. So it's hard for them to understand. They still think every class is offered every period, and that's just not possible. So we explain that to them. In May, Teachers will go back and adjust recommendations that they made based on the student's performance, and if they meet the prerequisite. If they meet it, teachers can move them up at that point. If they fell below it, they can also drop them down at that point. That is the last time we can change and that's the last time we can take elective requests and changes for students also with the schedule. Because once the summer hits, no schedule changes, and then they're released at the end of the summer. Can't hear you, Miss Tom.
Yeah, you would think that 6 years after COVID, I would really, know how to unmute myself by now. Sorry about that. So I'm just going to hit send here, and I'll let Ms. Housel pop in and answer any questions that are still lingering in there. We'll do our best to get to them all, and otherwise we'll try to get to them at the end. So I want to spend some time talking about extracurriculars and what that means. And so really extracurriculars, when it comes to the land of college admissions, is anything that a student does outside of the confines of the classroom. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions I see out there is that students and parents think that there's kind of like a checklist, like you must have one of these and two of these, you must have one sport and one community service with a minimum of X number of hours, and a student needs to also must have a job or must start a nonprofit. There are no musts. And the reality is that everybody's pathway is different, and students should look at engaging in the areas that are most interesting to them, the things that speak to them, the things that they enjoy. In addition to, as Ms. Housel mentioned earlier, things that are related to their areas of interest, which should connect back to things they enjoy, right? And so that includes all the clubs and organizations that we know we have at the high school. But for some students, choose not to involve themselves very much at the high school. While we love them to, it's also okay if they choose not to. So I have some students who are applying to colleges that tell me, I've never joined a club at the high school because maybe they have a reason. They got to go home, they got to care for younger siblings, things like that, those types of family obligations, or maybe they're just not feeling it. But when we talk a little bit more, I find out they're maybe involved in like a Somerset County Youth Leadership Program, or they're involved at Mary Mother of God. They're on the rec basketball team, and they also work after school at Weiss, and they've been working there since they're a sophomore. And so everybody's path's different. Their applications are going to be different. I want to be really honest. Every student does not need to have a robust, massive list of extracurricular activities. And I would definitely say that quality is more important than quantity. If you're freaking out and that your child has never gotten involved, I'm here to tell you it's okay. Because do I have seniors who have not been involved in any organizations or done anything outside of school? Yeah, I do. And you know where they're going next year? College. And so everybody's pathway is different. Every school is looking for different things as well. But this kind of gives you an idea of all of the different things that are out there that quote unquote count. When schools are looking at applications and they're looking at the extracurricular activity portion of their application. So what are they looking for? I just said quality over quantity, right? Ms. Housel mentioned before, that opportunity to refine interests as they go along. Sometimes an activity that you're in, was meaningful. Either sometimes you didn't like it at the time, and so it's okay to not continue it. And as I just had a conversation, even with my own son, who is a junior, my oldest is a junior this year, and we've talked about, he's maybe got a few too many activities, and he's feeling like he's in a little bit over his head. And we're kind of already talking about next year as a senior and how to refine that even for his senior year. And there's an activity that takes a lot of time. It's no longer really speaking to him. It's keeping him from doing other things. And, he's ready to move on from that activity. And that's okay. He's going to replace it with something else that's, be able to spend a little more time in something that's more related to what he wants to do, give an opportunity for other students, and continue his other involvement. It's a music activity. He's in like 5 of them. So he needs to let one go. And that's okay if it's time for a student to do that. Fulfill the commitment, and then we can make new decisions for going forward. And students, and activities can really talk about, what a student's area of interest is. So, I'll continue this example of my own kid, right? He's real involved in music stuff because he likes music a lot and he enjoys it. And he's interested in a career that's kind of like sports broadcasting, communications kind of stuff. So he's involved in stuff related to that. And that's where he's involved. And so when, if I were reviewing his application, which I'm not, used to do that, not doing that anymore. I'm going to see, a kid, it's going to be very clear to me what this kid's interests are and how they relate to what he wants to do. And as an admission office, I'm going to say, like, how does that fit with what we're looking for in a student? And so if I'm a school that is really big on maybe like spirituality and community service and service to others, they're not going to see that in my kid. And that's okay, because honestly, that school's not a good fit for my kid, because that's not how he chooses to spend all of his time, and that's okay. And so when a student is applying, they're also going to be applying to schools that are a good fit based on who they are. And that's really what a lot of this extracurricular is about them figuring out who they are and then showing who they are through that part of themselves outside of the classroom. So schools are looking also for leadership experience. And I remind students that leadership comes in many forms. So it is not all about being the president of an organization and being the president of 5 organizations. That's not the only way to show leadership. So leadership can also be in doing a program within that club, hosting a specific fundraising drive or something like that. That's leadership. Even if it's not an elected title that a student has. And there are ways to convey that on their application that's really important. I'll be honest, the most selective schools, some of you may be looking towards the most highly selective schools out there, that gives you an idea about what they're looking for. They're looking for more of a lasting impact, students looking outside themselves, very high level awards. The unusual and the extraordinary are the things that tend to stand out the most in those most selective schools out there. I would say that I generally see that our students who are getting admitted to the most highly selective schools out there, the ones who are really successful in the process, are students who have picked a limited number of activities, of things that they actually enjoy and connect together. They're highly involved in those particular activities. I find that the students who are trying to check all of the boxes and have a resume the length of my arm, I often find those students are not as successful in the schools that they're striving towards. So it's just something to consider, that sometimes paring back a little bit and focusing more not only will be a healthier experience for your child throughout high school, but also often lets them land in a better place at the other end as well. So another thing to think about is, what's your kid doing over the summer? And my one big caution is, do we think it's a great idea for students to use summers wisely? Yes. But we don't want them to burn out by going for 12 months of a year throughout high school. A big part of this is about the journey. It's not just this like prize of where I get in at the end, because we want to get to the end and feel like all the things they did were worth it, not because of the college that they're going to, but because they were worth it because of the experience and who it helped them become along the way. And sometimes when we're doing all of the things, we lose the focus on that, and students get to the end and they feel very unfulfilled. We're definitely reaching the unfulfilled part of the senior year a little bit, especially as some students don't get into some places that were goals. They feel like, I did so much and I didn't enjoy stuff, and now I'm at the other end and I didn't have the outcome I wanted either. And so I would say the students who feel most fulfilled at the end are the students who had a great experience most of the way through high school, because let's be honest, no one enjoys it every day. But they feel like they had a worthwhile experience, and the things that they've done, and they have more confidence who they've become and their ability to be successful and happy at any of the places that they wind up in, because they've had that experience in high school. They know they can translate that to the college end. So when we're talking about, the summer, I would say I try to, have students think about like work is a great place to spend their time. It's also a great place to make money. And I'll kind of cycle back to that a little bit when we get to financial aid. It's a really good opportunity for a student to contribute to their own college education. Colleges like to see students have jobs. I feel like somewhere along the way, like we lost the plot a little bit and thinking that we needed to check all the boxes. But work is one of the most valuable things out there in terms of gaining adulting skills, responsibility, time management, communication skills, so many things that people, accuse the younger generation of kind of losing. Work is a big place we get those things because we're not with our heads in our phones and our other devices, right? And so those are great experience for students. I'm going to come back to summer programs in just a sec. We talked about students can do coursework, they can do research. There's all kinds of other activities out there. If you look at my website, they've thrown a couple of times into the Q&A. There's a lot of listed things there for students as a starting point for where they can look for these things, if not for this summer or for future summers as well. But it's super important as well that students or families are scheduling in time for travel, relaxation. Again, we do not want to burn out during our high school years. So to get back to the summer programs, I think the really important thing in summer programs is to keep in mind that the benefit here is in the experience, not in the line on the resume. So there are a lot of summer programs out there, a lot. And I list a small portion of them on my website. And when I will send out kind of those newsletters of opportunities, I try to concentrate on things that are on the either free or less expensive side out there. There are realities that most of the programs out there are pay to play, and a lot of them are very, very expensive. That does not correlate at all with how selective they are or how impactful they are on a student's admission. In general, I would say free programs are often more highly looked at, by admission offices and highly selective, and highly selective institutions as well, programs as well. One of the big misconceptions out there is if I take a program on this college's campus, it's going to help me get in. I'm here to tell you that the vast majority of those programs on colleges' campuses actually have nothing to do with the college themselves. It's usually, most commonly, an outside program or organization that is simply renting space on that college's campus for the name and the draw that institution provides. It does not increase the student's chances of getting into that school at all. There are a couple of exceptions that are highly selective ones. If you look at the summer programs list on my website, I kind of note which ones those are. So it's pretty clear which ones those are. Oftentimes the ones with the big fancy names and the ones that use the words like presidential and leadership and things like that, they like to use those in their names. Oftentimes those are not as highly selective as they sound. So I don't want you to attend thinking like, if I go to these programs, this is going to be what gets me into the college. So what I encourage students when they're trying to decide, like, do I go for this particular program is, what are you looking to get out of it? Is it going to allow you to explore more into your major? Are you looking to get out of it the experience of living away from home, or taking a college class, or living with a roommate? Because those are all about the experiences, and you'll get that out of them, and that is valuable. But you have to be able to correlate the price of the program with that as the value, not with the idea that, like, if I have this on my resume, this is going to be what gets me in, because that's much less likely to happen. So that's kind of my way of thinking about it. And I do think that there are many valuable summer program opportunities out there, especially those that allow students to spend a little time exploring a major. Because let's face it, there's a lot of things that they're not going to be able to explore in their high school experience. And even at whatever price, the summer program is, it can still be money well spent, as opposed to them waiting until they get to college to explore that opportunity, which is probably a much higher price tag, especially if the program is pretty niche, right? Like, so if a kid's thinking, I want to do architecture, there's not a whole lot of opportunity to explore that in high school. But if they're able to find a summer program or other kind of outside program to let them give that a try, that's probably well worth your money, because the college that they're going to wind up as an architecture major is only going to be like a small list of specific colleges. There are not a ton of architecture programs out there. And so if your kid rules that out and they're like, oh, just kidding, that's not at all what I want. Well, now we're looking at a whole different set of schools. And if the first time that they experience that is like in their first semester of college and they've gone to this school just because of the architecture program, well, now we're not happy and we don't want to stay. And that's a much more expensive thing. So they can be super valuable. They can also give a lot of meat for students to speak about in their application, and being able to show that, how they know that this major is a fit for them. And so there are often places to do that in the college application process. So let's switch gears a little bit and roll over to standardized testing. So I'm going to just give a quick piece about PSATs. So PSATs at Hillsborough High School are given we do the Saturday test date. Hillsborough does not do PSAT 9-10 at all. We don't administer that, or the 8-9. We don't administer the PSAT 10. We only give the PSAT NMSQT. Happens once a year on a Saturday in October. So our sophomores, you had the opportunity to do that this year. You have an opportunity to take that PSAT again next year, or if you didn't take it this year, to take it next year for the first time as a junior, so they can take it in grade 10 or grade 11. I generally do recommend 10th graders to take it. Don't freak out if you didn't do it. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. By any stretch of the imagination. Your kid could certainly, like I said, give it a whirl in the fall of their junior year. 9th grade students, I'd recommend that they take it for the first time as a sophomore. If your kid took it as a sophomore, they had the experience. It's up to them if they want to take it again as a junior. A lot of our students choose not to take it a second time as a junior. Unless they're going to be a really high scorer. If they're a super high scorer in 10th grade, they should definitely take it again as an 11th grader, because that is the test that will be used for National Merit Scholarship eligibility, is that PSAT 11. And when I talk about a very high score and what is needed for National Merit, you'll see that the top of the scale is a 1520. You typically need to be in New Jersey. You really tend to need to be somewhere in that 1500 to 1520 range to have a chance to move on in that national merit process. So that's kind of what we're talking about for that. So now what about the SAT and the ACT? Let's talk about it a little bit. We recommend that any student who's looking to apply to four-year schools tests 1 to 3 times in the junior year. Some choose to get all of their testing done in the junior year. Some try to do their testing in the spring of their junior year and then the summer and fall of their senior year. It kind of depends on the kid. Different things can be okay. It really depends on the student. The things to think about. If you're choosing to test, when you're ready to test, what's the purpose of testing at this time? So sometimes I hear our students want to test as sophomores. So my first question is, why you want to test now? Is it because you are super advanced, it fits in the best with what you're doing? Is it because you are looking to play Division I sports, and so you want to, or 2 sports, and you kind of want to get a score on your record for your recruitment process? Totally makes sense. Or is it because you feel like you should? Because if you take it in 10th grade because you feel like you should, you probably shouldn't. It's probably not the right time for you. I'd look at where the student is in the math curriculum, can be important. The SAT does cover a lot of Algebra 2. There are some kind of borderline pre-calc trig topics on it. I mean, you can give it a go without it. But I do feel like you need to have at least some Algebra 2 on there to be doing okay. Has the student done any preparation? Because if they haven't done any preparation, they're going in and taking it cold, you could do that for free by taking a practice test on the app. And no need to give the College Board $60 to do that. And so that's what I would encourage a student to do if that was the whole point. Think about what else they got going on in their life. So, are they taking AP tests? If so, May is never a good time of year. June, how does it fit in with their sports schedule or their marching band schedule or other things like that, and kind of plan ahead as to when you want to do that. And also consider, is the student ready at this point to commit this score to their testing record? because once it's on the testing record, it's on the testing record and it's staying there. And there are some schools out there who do want to see all of the test scores that a student ever got. And so, that could be a reason to hold off for some students in when they take that test. One of the things that I didn't mention before is on this PSAT scale, you kind of see this like up and down line here. Even though the scales are different from PSAT to SAT, PSAT is 320, 1520, SAT is 400 to 1600. There is supposed to be alignment in the scores kind of vertically, I guess we can call it. So, I mean, the idea behind it, your mileage may vary on how much we all buy it, but the idea behind it is if a student scored like a 1050 on their PSAT, that if they took the SAT like the next day, they'd score somewhere in that same 1050-ish range is what we'd be looking at. Now, from year to year, I often see students' scores increase, definitely from time 1 of testing to time 2, usually kind of a 100-point increase is definitely not unheard of, going from one test time to another. So I mentioned before there's SAT and ACT. Hillsborough hosts the SAT. We're not an ACT testing site, but it doesn't mean that a student can't take the ACT. They sign up at company's website and they can take that test. The tests have actually aligned a lot more over the years. So where they used to be, I feel like real different. I feel like they've kind of come together a bunch more in the last couple of years since both tests have changed. And so students can, try them both. They can take practice tests. They can see which test they're more comfortable with. And that's what I would encourage them to do. And some students do choose to take both during their college, kind of search process. And that's okay. So I wanted to kind of cover the idea of test optional. And it was like the first question that popped up today is like, were we going to cover this? So during COVID, many schools eliminated the SAT, ACT requirement. And they had test optional policies where it was up to the student whether or not they wanted to submit testing scores and have them be a part of their record. So now it's 2026. I don't know whether we're 5 or 6 years into this process, but that's where we are. There has been some changes. There have a couple of schools that never went test optional. Those Florida and Georgia schools were never test optional, even during the height of COVID. There are a handful of schools that have brought back their testing policies. Down under test required, you see kind of a listing of what we've got going on for next year. So for the class of 2027 that we know of now. And when I say that, it is because each year schools are making decisions about what they're doing, usually kind of like only 1 year at a time. There are some schools that have said like, this is our policy through 2028. I love those schools. They're fantastic. But there's a lot more schools out there that are kind of making that decision on a year by year basis. So pretty soon I expect more decisions for the class of 2027. But this whole, like, we decide year by year is why a big part of why I say, take the tests and then figure out what you're going to do with them. Because then you're keeping all the doors open. And that's the name of the game with everything when it comes to high school. Why do I want you to do well early in high school? Well, one, because I want you to do well and be successful, but also because I want you to keep the doors open for all of the possible things that could be out there for you. And that's why I say that I encourage students to take the SAT or ACT once and see where it goes. At some point in the junior year, the student will start to have a little bit better idea of where they're applying. They'll start to have a little bit better of an idea of what those policies are going to be for the schools that they are applying to. So once a student tests and they've got some kind of testing record out there, for each school they apply to, they're going to decide, what they're doing. They're going to decide if they are sending their scores or not sending their scores to individual schools. And that decision can be made on a school by school basis. And we help students through that process in the senior year in deciding, am I sending my school's scores? Where am I sending them, et cetera? One of the big misconceptions and worries that parents have is like, my kid isn't going to get in schools if they're test optional. The school's going to assume that my kid's scores aren't good, et cetera. I will tell you that the reality is that at most schools out there, these schools that are test optional, It's about a 50-50 split. Usually we'll see about 50% of kids that are applying, and not just Hillsborough, like overall, about 50% of kids are applying test optional, and about 50% of the kids that get admitted are test optional. It's usually kind of right around in the middle. There are some schools that are even higher than that, like GW, George Washington, their percentage is even higher than 50% are applying test optional. And there is data on that stuff out there that you can kind of follow. And, I help students figure that out later on in the process as they decide what to do. So we generally recommend, like I said, test, see where it goes later on. Also, I did just realize I have two schools here I need to take off of here, but I will do that before we finish posting it. I also just wanted to mention AP exams. What are they? They're content-based exams. They align to a corresponding class. So a student takes an AP biology course. There's an AP biology exam that is offered in May. The student would choose whether or not they want to sign up to take that test at the end. The purpose of taking the test at the end is, one, to prove competency in the course, but it's really primarily a means of earning credit at colleges. So let's take AP Psychology as an example, because that's a nice general class. Student could take the exam at the end of that course. They can send the score, which is a 1 through 5, 5 is the highest, to the school that they're going to attend, and then that school would determine whether they're going to get grant credit for that course. Big misconception is, I shouldn't bother taking it in psych because I'm not going to be a psych major. Well, those are actually some of the more valuable ones to take and some of the more valuable credits to get, because they can help satisfy general education requirements at the school the student goes to. And so, that's really something to think about. I'm very much hoping my own son is going to pull the necessary score on his AP Calc test, because he is someone who would love to never take calculus or math again and isn't really going to need it for his course of study. So the advantage here is, if he's able to get that credit, then he can just knock out his math requirements in high school and not have to take more of it when he gets to college. So that can be a really good way to do that. I also want to address the concept of self-study, because I feel like I'm seeing more and more students who are signing up for AP exams without taking the course. And I just want to be really clear that colleges are very, very clear that they much, much, much prefer if students takes the class and the exam where that is possible, as opposed to just self-studying and just taking the test. For students who are just taking the test, I would say, if you're doing that, I hope it's really more about getting the credit, because I think you're unlikely to see the bump in admissions that you're hoping for. AP exam scores are not always looked at in the admission process. There are many, many schools, including Rutgers, that don't look at AP scores in the admission process. They're looking at what the student has done in the classroom, and that AP score is purely for college credit. There are other schools that are looking, but again, they really would prefer to see the student take the course and the exam rather than just the exam. So I just kind of want to put that out there. Just want to look at the kind of the basic elements of a search. I've got some resources here that are going to be in the presentation. You'll have access to some worksheets and things like that. I really encourage students, when they're starting to think about colleges, to not think about the name, but think about who they are and where they could be successful, and then worry about matching that to specific names of schools later. And so, what's important to the student? Ms. Housel said it was important to her to be able to roll out of bed and not take a bus. And that's important. That's a good realization to have. It's a good realization for a student to have, that, I really am not going to be super successful in a place where I have zero interaction with my teacher. And I probably, being in a lecture hall of 550 students is not it. I'm not going to be able to be successful in that environment. I know myself, and I know I'm not going to get myself and drag myself to class. Thinking about things like that, thinking about, what's important to them. I said before, schools that value service to others, things like that. If that's really important to them, we want to make sure schools that check those boxes are what ultimately makes their list. So I've got some different kinds of self-surveys that students can explore. We talked about with our sophomores, we've already done a little bit of career exploration, and we encourage students to kind of take that further on their own. And also just to kind of keep their ears open and ask questions, talk to friends and family and acquaintances about what they do, how they get experience, the experiences they have, how they kind of landed there. Look at people who have cool jobs and figure out like how they get there. You can trace someone back on LinkedIn and see what did they major in, what school did they go to, what were their experiences. Those can be really valuable ways to kind of see the different pathways that someone could take to get to an end. And I would say that oftentimes it is far less linear than students think. There are things that are a lot more open than they know at all. A big one is, I want to major in pre-med. I hear that a lot at Hillsborough. One, pre-med is not a major. And two, a lot of students don't know, like, you don't have to be a science major to be pre-med. You can major in literally anything as long as you are taking the prerequisite courses for medical school, doing well in the MCAT, of course, and getting the other outside of class experiences that you need for admission for medical school. Johns Hopkins actually reserves spots for people who are studio art majors. So like you can do all kinds of things. If you look at the med school websites, most of the schools out there say what college the undergrad institution the student came from and what their major was. And it is often very enlightening to realize that not everybody on there was a bio major, and not everybody came from these, short list of super selective universities. It is far more varied than I think most people understand. So I encourage students to do some of that exploration. I think it's really important. And I kind of just covered a bunch of these things a little early. I would say a couple of the things that are hardest to declare later. I said, I'd like to see students go in with an open mind and figure out what they want. Some of the things that are hardest to pick up later: nursing. That's a good one to really solidify if they can. Engineering and architecture. And that's because those programs are rather rigid in college. And a lot of colleges also are unable to allow students to transfer into those programs once they're already there, or if they are able to transfer, and it often extends their duration of their total study. So it's often easier to start in. It's not easy to get into them, but if you get into them, it's easier to come out than it is to go into them later. But those are real good ones to do some real exploration about in high school, so they can try to land in the right spot when they first get to college. And when we're thinking about kind of colleges, there's a lot of things that come into it. There's, an academic fit for the student. Does it have their major? Is it the right competitiveness level? Does it have other things they might be looking for in terms of a dual program? Is it the right social fit for them? Are they a student who really wants to go to games and they want to go to a rah-rah school? Or are they more reserved, and their group of kids, friends, is more likely to be hanging around around the TV in your basement, and maybe they're gaming? Those might be different schools, and so it's important for a student to have the right wind up at the right spot, and then of course the right financial fit as well. And we're going to talk about finances in just a sec. Just want to mention that the college list is going to change over time. So what kids are thinking about in 9th and 10th grade often does not resemble where they're applying to in 12th grade, either because their interests changed, they got to know themselves better. Academically, it became clear what was a better fit for them in terms of, what kind of level of school. Ultimately, students are going to apply to a balanced list of schools across really a spectrum. Some places that we feel like are a sure thing, decent chances, some reach schools. And this is kind of an idea of, the average HHS student and how many schools they applied to. And it is very different from those of us who graduated high school a rather long time ago and how many schools we applied to. I probably applied to like 5 schools. One because my parents made me, and then like 4 other schools beyond that. I would say do I have students who apply to 1 or 2? I do. I have students that apply to 5. I think the average is something like 7.92 or something like that this year. But the numbers in general have kind of skewed upwards. But I always caution students, and I'll nag them later on in high school, to remember that a longer list is not always a better list. So what we like to look at are balanced lists and appropriate lists. And early on in high school, that's kind of hard to figure out because you don't really have a GPA, you don't really know where you are yet. But as you start to kind of get to the end of sophomore year, you start to get a better sense of where your student is. I encourage students to check out, every year I publicize like a college placement list, kind of like slideshow. So if you go to my website that was on there before, it's linked here. It's this class of 25 admits by GPA. It's called College Placements on my website on the left side. And there's always a slideshow it's going to show for the most recent graduating class, kind of like by GPA band, where they were admitted, not by students. I don't disclose which kid, but I kind of group them all together. Where were they admitted? Where were they waitlisted? Where are they denied? Where are they going? And so that helps students to get a better idea of what about students like me, or perhaps where I aspire to be by the end of next year. Where are they getting accepted? Where are they going? And so that can also be used for, of course, goal setting early in high school. You can take a look at, like, what does it take to be admitted to schools that might be goals of mine? And that can help motivate a student earlier on in high school. So I always encourage students to check that out. Here is kind of a quick snapshot of some of our more popular schools, just to give you an idea about what we're looking for. Something to keep in mind is this is the average HHS weighted GPA of admitted students, but this GPA we're talking about, like, this is like a senior year GPA. And GPAs do go up over the course of high school in many cases in terms of weighted GPA, because students take more academic courses and weighted GPAs that bring those numbers up, perhaps a little artificially, but they pull them up. And so the kind of top GPA in freshman year is usually, weighted GPA is usually right around 100, 101, something like that. Whereas the student who's at the top by the end of junior year, that top GPA is more like a 107. So they kind of move up a lot over the years. But this kind of gives you an idea about what we're looking at, helps students get kind of a goal as to, what they are. Keep in mind that these are average numbers, though. So like for Pitt, which is super popular for us, you can see 129 kids applied last year. It's very popular. The average weighted GPA is a 98. Does that mean a student needs a 98 to get in? No, it does not. Because if kids with a 102, 4 points above that 98, get in, then so do kids with a 94, which are 4 points below, right? And so that's the average. And so there's kind of, a circle around that in terms of who's getting in. And so at ECU, you see that average is a 91. That's average. I have kids with 99s that get into ECU or go to ECU. I have kids with 85s and 84s and 83s that get into ECU as well. And so there are spots for the vast majority of students at four-year schools, and everybody's journey is a little bit different, and everybody's path is a little bit different. But there's lots of schools out there with lots of different criteria. So we talked about visiting, not too early. I would say I encourage low pressure visits earlier on if we're looking to look at things. We don't want to stress students out too much. So if they have interest, then roll with it. If they don't have interest, it's okay to sit back a little bit. I will tell you, we've done exactly 3 college tours with my January junior. Last June, he had a reason to be up in Connecticut. He was interested in Quinnipiac. I said, hey, while we're there, why don't we visit Quinnipiac? And so we visited Quinnipiac last June. It was a summer visit. Went, liked it enough that he'll probably wind up applying, but we'll probably try to go back at some point when there's actually like classes in session. Pretty good first visit. It was chill. He liked it. It didn't scare him too much. This year in November, we went over teacher convention weekend up to the frozen tundra of the north in Syracuse, and it was cold and it snowed. And so that may have talked that one down a little bit, which is good because it's like $90,000. But went up and visited Syracuse, and on the way in that area, we also checked out Ithaca because it's super close, also had his major, liked it, liked the school, and realized it is not a personal fit for him. He didn't see his people when he was walking around, and he's like, you know what? This one's not a great fit for me. Syracuse on the list, but it's a little far. So now we're kind of revising. We're looking a little bit closer. You can also look at schools that are in the area that you're going to for something else. So like if you're going on vacation down to the Outer Banks, like check out Coastal Carolina, check out something on the way. I'm queen of checking out things on the way. And you'll often see those on my Instagram and Facebook, is that I'm posting pictures from random schools that I have visited on my way to other places. But those can be a great low pressure way to check out something and realize that, like, hey, big schools are not a fit for me, or hey, really small schools are not a fit, or I really don't like stuff in the city, or this is way too far in the middle of nowhere. So those can be the valuable parts of those early visits. Just wanted to touch quick. And now you're all falling off your chairs since I clicked to this slide. This is the current cost of attending college. And so I put this here not to scare you, but for you to know what's coming. And I will tell you, these numbers are not going to be any lower by the time that your child gets to college applying age, because the numbers go up every year. So I just want to give you an idea what this number is, because I think it's important to be able to plan ahead and see what the realities are. These are the direct costs. So the costs of going to the institution that you pay to them. It doesn't include other stuff outside of this that other schools will include in the cost of attendance. So if you see something that says cost of attendance, it also includes like books, transportation, personal expenses, etc. I pulled those off and just gave you the raw numbers here. Of these, the living on campus part usually is these days mostly in the $16,000 to $20,000 range. So about $16,000 to $20,000 of these numbers is living and eating on campus. So that kind of gives you an idea of what that looks like. How do we pay for it? That's a really good question. So there's two big types of aid out there. There's merit-based aid and there's need-based aid. Need-based aid is based on how much money you make and what you have and what the government thinks you can pay. And merit-based aid is based on what the student's done throughout high school. I will say that the largest source of merit-based aid is from the institutions themselves. And some keys are that students get merit money where they are a really strong applicant. So if a student is applying to a reach school where they're, thrilled that they got in, they didn't think they were going to get in, they're probably not going to get merit money there. The student's going to see the most merit money the higher they are above the average criteria. You're going to see more merit money from private schools than public schools. But along with that, we also know that most private schools cost more than public schools. But sometimes it kind of works out. I definitely have some students who are paying, quite a few students who are paying less money to go to a private university than they are to go to Rutgers, because they don't get money at Rutgers and they got a lot of money at the private institution that they applied to. When we look at public university, a lot of our students like big schools. They like, because we go to a big school, right? So they like big schools. It's important to know that most of those very popular, large out-of-state schools, a lot of them don't give much or any money to students who are not from their state. So students, when they get to the application process, really do need to be very intentional about where they're applying, based on also what their goals are in regards to finances. If they are merit aid hunting, they need to be careful about where they're applying. If they're merit aid hunting, they're not seeing that money at Penn State because Penn State's not giving them anything. They're unlikely to see that money at the University of Maryland. They're not seeing that money at the University of Illinois. They're gonna see that money if they look at the University of Alabama. If they're strong, they'll see a bunch at South Carolina. They'll see a bunch at Ohio State. And they'll also see it at private institutions as well. I mentioned, a lot of those numbers are pretty high in terms of merit aid for private schools. So for instance, Quinnipiac, they're probably in the same range as like Seton Hall. I know that their top scholarship this year was like 35. And that's not super unusual. So a lot of those schools can get brought down into that, 40-ish range, which, while it's not cheap, it's not that much more than the full price of the in-state schools, which many of our students are paying. So what can you do now, early in high school? One, I said, students working is a great way for them to contribute to, college costs. Scholarships are not guaranteed. We can ask our student to spend all the time in the world applying to scholarships. But there's a very real chance that they're not going to get outside scholarships. A lot of them are very specific in who they target, and in the students that they're looking for in their kind of like program scholarships. And when I say that, I'm talking about like Coca-Cola scholarships, the Elks Club scholarships, all those other kind of like outside scholarships out there. Do I encourage students to apply? Yes. Do I encourage them to bank on that funding their college? Honestly, no, I don't. And I do say that as somebody who's working both in admissions and kind of on this side of the desk since 2004. So, 20 some odd years now. Don't rely on that paying for all of it, because it's not going to happen. Make a smart list in terms of where a student is applying. Have very early family contribution conversations about what is going to be financially realistic. The time to have those conversations is on the front end of the college application experience, not at the tail end in April of the student's senior year, when all of the options are not okay, because it's also not okay, in my own opinion anyway, to plan on the funding of this to be that you as a parent are taking $70,000 in loans per year. It's not really sustainable. It's not great for your future financial health either. And it's important to understand as well that there are student loans, but student loans are capped. And the amount of that student loan is like $5,500. So it's really hard when I hear students say, my parents said I'll just need to take loans, because the student is limited to what they can take in their name. There are other loans that they can take outside of there, but they need a cosigner to do that. No one is giving an 18-year-old with no like net worth $80,000 a year, nor really should we be, right? And so the other option out there is parent loans, and that's, kind of on you. And what does that look like when you're in your 40s or 50s or however old you are, when your kid's 18, right? So those are important things to think about and know going into it. You can do a federal student aid estimator, get an idea about what the federal government thinks you can contribute. I very much encourage families to do net price calculators. I'll talk about it all the time. Every time I talk to you, I'll tell you about net price calculators. They're on every school's website. I encourage you to do different kinds of schools and get an idea. It is very eye-opening. I think my husband shed a tear or a lot of tears. And we are educators. And so we are what I would call middle of the road Hillsborough type people. And it is pretty eye-opening to realize, how much of that number is going to come down to your funding and the college list that you make. So I think it's really important to figure that out early. And we do have a financial aid night that we run every year. That's listed also on my website, and I encourage people to watch it when you're ready to do it. But this is kind of your overview so that you know what's coming, not because I'm trying to be a downer, but because I want you to be realistic and know what's coming. It's really hard when the class of 2026 there's Facebook pages for like every parent group out there. Class of 2026 Facebook somehow is on my Facebook all the time. And I see every day, I'm watching people like that are completely flabbergasted by what the financial aid package and what the costs are, and have no idea how they're going to pay it. And they're in January of their kid's senior year. And so you have the gift of time. I can't, unfortunately, give you the gift of money, but I can give you the gift of time, and that you've got 2 or 3 more years to think about what the options are going to be and how you can get there to a place, for financial health for both you and your child as they go through as well. So I hope that was helpful. I'm very glad to see that Ms. Housel has answered many, many questions. And so I don't have any lingering in the Q&A box. You're absolutely welcome, to throw a few more in there if you have them. This presentation is linked on my website, which we've thrown in the chat a bunch of times. It's linked on my website on the presentations page. Everything is always going to be there. Every program we do is always recorded, popped up on our YouTube within a couple of days. So once you pick up yourself up off the floor at some point in the future, you can feel free to go through and, rewatch things that were maybe important, or you wanted to tell your spouse, like, hey, you better watch this. You can go back and do that at any time. I did also promise I was going to kind of show you our school counselor names. I don't have them with the students with the letters of the alphabet because it varies a little bit, by grade level. Also, I just want to acknowledge we do have some changes going on in the high school counseling department right now. Miss Williamson's last day is tomorrow. Miss Krekel will be taking over her caseload. Miss Krekel's in the building right now. She's been worked for us as an intern last year. She's been long-term subbing for Miss Regitz's caseload since the fall. She's going to be hopping over into Miss Williamson's caseload permanently. Miss Costa, if you have an older kid, you might know Miss Costa. She's going to be coming back, help us out for a month or so until Miss Regitz gets back from maternity leave. Miss Delmonico is still in for Miss Johnston. Miss Johnston should be back later this year. So these are your contacts for today. I don't have an email address for Costa yet, but I'm sure she'll send out an email when she starts for students who want to see somebody in their interim in that caseload. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in. Otherwise, have a fantastic night. Thank you to Miss Housel. She was fantastic. She's a first timer on this program, so I really appreciate her helping me out tonight. If you have questions, just leave them in. I think I'm going to try to answer some of them just live. Feel free to log off as you're done. I'll answer some of these live. What's the point of taking AP courses? It's an opportunity for students to challenge themselves with rigor. Rigor is something that schools are looking at in the admission process. How does the student challenge themselves? That could be in level of the class. It could be in continuing to take courses beyond the minimum. So it is more rigorous to have a schedule that included Latin 1, 2, 3, and 4, even without AP, than it is to just have Latin 1, which was the bare minimum to graduate from high school. So AP is just another way to show rigor. And it's also an opportunity to potentially earn college credit. So that would be kind of the other, end game in taking that. Some other questions here around clubs and what's more beneficial. I will say that no one club is like a guaranteed more beneficial thing than anything else. I see success with students in a wide variety of organizations. And so there's definitely no magic sauce, in getting in. And so that is, really important to know that students should find the thing that is the right fit for them. And if the answer is for them, robotics is the right fit for them, then fantastic. And within that organization, they can find the place that's right for them, whether that's a more technical role or a more business or social media role. There's lots of different ways for students to get involved in that organization. And if that's not their cup of tea, or they don't like that very large organization, they can look for something smaller that's a better fit for them. Or perhaps they have some interest in politics, and we've got debate and Model UN, and there's other things that are on that end. And we also have students who have political interests that might be canvassing for candidates or working with, candidates at different levels of government office. And so students really need to kind of figure out what is right for them and not worry so much about, is this the most helpful thing for me to do? Because I can tell you it is very apparent in college essays which students are authentic and which students were checking boxes. And the outcomes very much align with that. So someone asked about athletics. I didn't mention it tonight. If you go to my website, click on, I don't know whether it's athletics or college athletics on the left. I'm also the NCAA, call it liaison. I don't know. It sounds fancy to say that. But I'm also the person that works with potential athletes at our school. So there's a form students can fill out there. I'll send it out at some point before we get into the scheduling process, because it's a good time for counselors to touch base with students about that. And so that'll come out soon. But students can check out info there about kind of NCAA eligibility, what courses are needed, what GPAs are needed, et cetera. They can check that out there. Awesome. All right. And it looks like we are pretty much coming to the tail end here. So thank you so much to everyone. Have a fantastic night. And this will come out in an email. I'll send out all the links again. Have a wonderful evening. Good night, Mrs. Housel.
Good night. Night, everybody.
Yeah.